Tonight, we want to go beyond the headlines and take a closer look at indigenous movements in Latin America. According to our producer here at World Focus, who follows Latin America, activism by indigenous groups in that part of the world is on the increase. In addition to concerns about the environment, they also have concerns about access to education and job discrimination. For more on that, we're joined by Christopher Sabatini, the Senior Director of Policy at the Council of the Americas here in New York. Chris, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
It's great to be back.
So when we say indigenous people, exactly who are we talking about? Where are they and what kind of numbers?
You're talking largely about 11% of the population in Latin America. And it's a broad array of indigenous groups, from Chile all the way to Mexico, from Mapuche in Chile to Quechua, Aymara in Bolivia, to Mixtec and Zapotec, an array of indigenous groups in Mexico. But the 11% is important because they also represent the overwhelming majority of the poor in Latin America. And that's really where a lot of this, because of centuries of discrimination and prejudice, has really blocked their access to economic rights.
Right. So does that account for this increase in political activism that we're seeing in Latin America?
There are three primary reasons. The first is globalization itself. A lot of these groups now have access to international groups and international contexts that allows them to be able to get the word out and learn from others and mobilize and gain information about what others are doing. The second is globalization itself. In terms of economic reasons, is the search for natural resources is now encroaching on a lot of their lands. In the Amazon area in Brazil, or in the oil-rich areas in the interior of Ecuador or Peru. These are areas that indigenous have traditionally lived upon, and now international companies are now active in those areas. But the third area is democracy itself, is after, in essence, 2 decades of elections and democratic liberties, a lot of these groups now are becoming very conscious of their empowerment and are actually organizing and gaining a voice in ways they couldn't have before because there weren't democratic systems in the past.
Right. And also, did the election of Evo Morales in Bolivia in 2006 also sort of increase consciousness and political awareness about the fate of indigenous people? Yes,
and that really came as an arc of a longer process of indigenous organization at the local level that happened primarily as a result of decentralization in places like Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador that allowed indigenous leaders to form, gain access to elected positions in municipal and regional governments. And now we're seeing, for the first time in places like Bolivia, which has a majority indigenous population, made up primarily of 2 indigenous groups, Quechua and Aymara, now has an indigenous president, but also you're seeing very strong and at times contentious indigenous movements in places like Brazil, places like Ecuador, in places like Guatemala and Mexico, as well as Peru.
All right, Chris Sabatini, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.